This is Real Talk Real Estate with the Hill International Realty Team. Realtors Todd Dion, Janae Merriweather, Rod Maestas, and broker Jason Hill.
All right, everyone, as you saw in the title screen, the intro bump, we're going to be talking about short-term rentals today and what's going on in the short-term rental market localized to Austin, Central Texas. That's our focus because that's where we operate as the Hill International Realty Team. And we've got a team together that's done some research, looked into this, and we want to bring some valuable information to you. Now, I just want to also say on behalf of Hill International Realty, we are not financial advisors. We cannot give you financial advice. All we can do is share with you the data that we are seeing and then maybe provide some options for you if one of these things may affect you and impact you in some way. So what I'm going to do just to get the conversation started, to introduce you to the issue that you've already seen in the bump, is the short-term rental downturn that's occurring in Austin, Central Texas. Now, there's Airbnb, and they're arguing the point because there are some data showing that there is an Airbnb collapse in the Austin, Texas area. Even San Antonio is impacted by this as well. So let me just read a little bit of this. It says, this is a tweet, revenues are down nearly 50% in cities like Phoenix and Austin. And this is the article. Gurley tweeted on Tuesday while sharing the data on revenues per listing. He added that the collapse in revenues per Airbnb listing might force home buyers who had put their homes on the marketplace to sell their properties and trigger a housing bust in some cities comparable to that of 2008. Now, that's pretty dark. But what we want to talk about for you specifically, those of you who own short-term rentals, maybe you're struggling, maybe you're feeling this. If the data is pointing to a downturn, then do you need to sell? Do you need to get this property that's not making you any money on the market listed before a downturn happens and everybody floods the market? So this is how we want to set this up, and we want to discuss this with you and share this with you. So guys, I know we have Hunter. You worked for the HomeAway. You've been in that industry. You've seen the back end of things, and then all of us have various experience in, of course, real estate. That's what we're all about, the real estate market in Austin, Central Texas. So you've done the research as well. You've looked over some of the data. What are some of the things that we should be thinking about, or what are some of the things that those who own short-term rentals who are struggling right now, what should they be thinking about and considering?
Thank you, Todd. I would say it kind of boils down to two lanes of thought. Whether you want to stick with it for the long term and see through this downturn, or you would like to recuperate funds spent. Because at this point, with the downturn being imminent, this also provides a unique opportunity, to potentially expand portfolio. And as supply goes down, your vacation rental properties could begin to become profitable. Or if you would like to, recoup funds, getting your house on the listing, like you said earlier, before the flood, would be more beneficial to you. From the aspect of VRBO, HomeAway, Airbnb on their back end, it really boils down to, are you going to be that independent lister on our site? Are you going to be that premier property owner that is in charge of all of your listing prices or all of your vacation rental prices, how many days of the week that it's available, cleaning costs, recuperation fees? Or are you going to have a vacation management company take over? That's going to be a big cut of your profits. And in a time like this where sales are down, bookings are down, is that worth filling out that job to someone else and paying them to do it, or doing it yourself to recoup as much profit as possible? I would say that's going to be one of the big major issues and choices that these vacation rental homeowners are going to be looking to make very soon.
And if they're a private owner, Hunter, and they're trying to manage 4 to 5 properties, how, from your point of view, having seen the back end, are people actually able to do that? Because then it seems like it's going to become a full-time job for them and not just a passive moneymaker.
Understood. That's a great question. I would say it's very possible. And there are property owners that do that and more, just how some of the sites are set up on the back end for you to be able to do that. But what that requires is a little upfront time put in, because you can have your listing set up to be automated to some degree. You can kind of put in that information and put in that work so that you don't have to be looking at the listing as regularly as per se you may need to if you didn't have those tools available to you. Now you're just kind of checking whenever you're getting a booking, interacting with said guest, setting up the booking, and then moving on to the next one. It's not going to require constant daily maintenance if you don't want it to. You're able to set up and automate a lot of these things now so that they are more reoccurring and not constantly having to be maintained or fixed.
So, guys, what are some of the economic factors? Like if we are truly going to be seeing a downturn in short-term rentals, less bookings, those types of things, which, like I said in the intro, that the people who manage the properties, the Airbnb or list them, they're arguing one side, and then these other people, AirDNA, who keep up with all these, are saying, no, hold on a second. That's not true. You're saying, yes, your best properties are staying booked most of the time, but all of these people who are just now listing, all these people who just got into the market, all these people whose homes aren't popular, are not kind of destination oriented, they're not staying booked. And then I've seen some responses to where, hey, we were at 50% booking and now we're at 0. So there's something that's happening, and I think some of the data is anecdotal, like the personal experiences of the investors, and then some of it is definitely driven by real data and facts that are backing this up, that this is moving towards a short-term rental issue within Central Texas. Guys, you have any insight on that?
Yeah, without question. When you look at it, let's just talk about short-term rentals. They're still evolving, right? Short-term rentals are still evolving, and people are still figuring out how it actually works. When you have certain destinations that have a lack of hotel rooms, but an increase in visitors, whether it's business or recreational, the short-term rentals have really worked well in providing, more hotel rooms, more lodging for those folks coming in. So it's a definite positive. So in those areas where hotel rooms are still at a shortage compared to the visitors coming in, then they're probably going to see less of this episode in the evolution of short-term rentals. When you get into an area like Austin, we're all here in Central Texas, and Austin, Texas, we've seen over the last 5 years the increase of hotel rooms. I mean, that was one of the biggest things that the city worked on, is making sure that they had ample hotel rooms to be able to bring in, big corporate meetings and all those sorts of things. Because when those big clients start looking at where they're going to have these destinations, hotel rooms and restaurants and services and all those things make a big difference on who they choose. With that said, though, Central Texas is pretty interesting. You have Austin in the center, and then you have a lot of outlying cities as well that also do a lot of business. And when you look at it, when you're talking about in the city, the hotel rooms are one thing. If people like booking a cool Airbnb where they have a kitchen, maybe a pool or something like that, that's a little bit more private, it's definitely going to stay booked up because Austin sees a lot of visitors. It's the state capital, one of the largest universities there. You have a lot of tech going on in Austin as well. Then you start getting into the outlying areas where the Airbnb model has begun to increase. Those are the ones that are going to struggle a little bit because, they're outside of operations of where things are happening. Round Rock, Leander, and those sorts of things. You buy those homes and I'm going to Airbnb it. Yeah, there has to be a reason for that. Is there a destination? Is there some sort of plant or, other, factory or something that brings folks in? But if not, if they're just staying in Central Texas, then they're definitely going to see a little bit of fluctuation there because of the fact that, there are other choices. Also, in regards to Airbnbs, through the years, why have people chose them? Because they're convenient, right? They're convenient. The price range is pretty reasonable, sometimes even less than a luxury hotel. And you have a kitchen and all those other sorts of things. So I think all these factors make a difference in regards to who is actually going to be hit by this downturn that so many folks in the industry are saying is imminent.
Right. And that's one of the things that I kept running across for Austin. Even though you're mentioning that Austin itself or the outliers may feel it more than Austin proper, the data is actually showing that Austin is oversaturated with short-term rentals, and only a certain amount of those are staying booked. And so it's the people on the lower end in Austin, maybe they're new entries, they haven't had a lot of reviews, a lot of stays. They're not getting them because travel's actually decreasing. And there's some factors I'll bring up with that in just a minute, like just general economic things that's happening right now in our country on the state level, on the local level too, that is impacting short-term rentals. And this is where I would say every investor needs to really look at this and pay attention what's going on.
Correct. And also cost. Apologize for interrupting. Cost factors, because I talked about earlier that it is still a maturing market. It's still evolving, and all the fees associated are evolving also. I mean, when a lot of people got into Airbnb, at the beginning of this whole kind of tidal wave of having these lodgings outside of hotels, there wasn't any regulation. There was very little regulation. Now that regulation has increased substantially. And also the regulation has done two things. It's been twofold. One, it's increased revenue for, municipalities and that sort of thing. So it's costing the Airbnb owners more, but also it has deterred some Airbnbs because homeowners associations or whatever governing entity in these different neighborhoods say, we don't want short-term rentals in these areas. So, those are some of the underlying kind of behind the scene factors also that make a big difference, where me kind of connecting to what you were saying, Todd, folks getting in early have much more of a financial burden than ones who have been in it for a little bit as well, at least, off the top. So that can, you buy a property, you want to Airbnb, you buy it at market value. That's tough already. You Airbnb it thinking, okay, there's, a certain amount of things happening like in the city of Austin. So we should recoup it if we're able to get top dollar during the times there's festivals and ACL and, all those sorts of things. But the cost they have to pay back to the city in regards to taxes and to this and to that. And I mean, it gets expensive really quickly. So now their holding period has to be a lot longer, or they have to have more business to really kind of break even, more so than folks did who have owned those Airbnbs and run them for the last 5 or 10 years, who may now have enough cushion to be able to fly through these ups and downs of this evolving, economic activity, which is short-term rental.
So let me ask you this, and this is for everyone here. Where should an investor think about, okay, this is hurting too much now. I'm not getting bookings. I'm not keeping it booked. I'm not paying for the house any longer. It's coming out of pocket now, or it's coming out of reserves. In your mind as a real estate agent, just when is the point that you would advise an investor, man, it's time to get out. It is time to list this home. It's time to get out of the market. You can revisit this if the economy, gets better and whenever. So what's your advice to people who maybe got in late? Maybe we had all these people moving to Austin from 2020 to 2023. It's still, of course, people are still trickling in. Inventory still historically low. And for those of you who are listening, you need to understand that one of the reasons you couldn't find a long-term permanent residence is because investors, private and corporate investors, were buying up single-family residences and using them for short-term rentals. So, that's a concern as an agent for someone who might have a buyer, that these investors are taking homes off the market and holding on to them. So there's a lot there. So I encourage you to unpack that. What do you say to the investor who may need to get out, or what's maybe the sign? And then how do you feel about the short-term rental, like creeping in and taking away single-family properties?
Well, Rod, you want to touch base on that? I've got some stuff to say too.
Well, I mean, what's going to dictate it is how much money are you losing, right? I mean, if an investor has, if they're hemorrhaging cash, it's time to go now. I mean, if the numbers are right, they're saying that the market in Austin is down 50%, and you're actually losing money on every Airbnb that you have right now after you take out the cost of paying Airbnb or whatever company you're using, paying for the fees for, Austin, Texas, and all the other upkeep, and of course for your mortgage. You can't lose money for a very long time. So if you're at that point right now, it's time to consider selling.
And to answer those other questions, thanks, Rod, in regards to Airbnb's taking inventory off the market. I mean, that's just one of the problems, taking inventory off the market.
I do want to say one other thing too. Hunter was talking about how the thing is with Airbnb, they're actually starting to filter out some of the lower performing listings or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to consider too as well.
Because that affects their data. That affects so right. They're trying to present what's going on in a positive light. They're trying to say, "Oh no, this isn't really happening. Look over there." Right. And one of the ways they're doing that is by eliminating low performing bookings, and it fudges their numbers so that they can say, "Oh no, it's not really happening. You can still come and list with us." So there's some toying with this data that's happening, and we need to be aware of that.
Yeah, it's all about how you read the numbers, right? That's with anything. You can read the numbers so many different ways to justify whatever you're trying to sell. Going back to the inventory, yes, Airbnb's taking inventory of single family homes off the market for normal folks who want to buy them for long term for their own family purposes. But here in the Austin area, build to rent is huge right now. Build to rent, they're building neighborhoods. San Antonio just has a new neighborhood that, it's like 240 homes, and they're all built to rent because, this market it needs so much housing, and interest rates are going up, and some folks trying to buy are finding it tough. So, but they want to rent the, 3-bedroom, 2-car garage with a little fence around it. So a lot of development has been really focused on build to rent, and they're seeing that here in Central Texas, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin area. So that's taking a big portion of space in regards to buyers or families or singles wanting to have a home, and they can't afford it, so they're going to rent it. But new construction usually has some sort of ratio of how many investors are going to let buy. We just see it here. There's a lot of investors here because there's a lot of renters here in the Central Texas market. Why people rent, maybe because of the fact that, again, people will come here and live for 6 months, maybe a couple years, and they don't want to buy and go through that whole process. So they're going to rent. So this Central Texas market is still a relatively good rental market as well. So I think the Airbnbs, the amount of Airbnbs, it's not going to be as impactful as just the investors coming in buying to rent. Big investment companies, buying hundreds of properties and then spinning them out and putting them on the rental market. So I don't think that's as big of a concern of Airbnbs taking single family homes off the market. Are they? Sure. But is it to a point where we really need to be concerned about it? I don't think we're there yet.
Well, I sure would like to sell these houses and list them as an agent versus seeing them just sitting there spinning, or if they're struggling, and the owner's struggling to maintain, etc. Then that's when I kind of feel like I would say, look, you're an investor. I get you wanted to get into this market, but unfortunately, you got in it at the tail end, at the downturn. You can't take and absorb the losses that you're having to take right now. And it's time to list. It's time to get this thing on the market. Let it be a permanent, resell it to another investor. Okay. But I honestly, my personal opinion is I want you to sell it to a private resident, because I think we do need the inventory on the market right now.
Agreed. And also, Todd, I think that if going back to your question about when to sell, it depends on how you got into it. if you got into it serious, meaning you thought about it and you went into it really to embrace this short-term rental, you got in, you got a number of them. Short-term rentals really work when there's some sort of seasonal or angle to them, just like anything else, right? So if you buy down in South Padre an Airbnb, you know you're going to rent it up for the most part because that's a vacation destination, right? That's a vacation destination. You get one in Leander or Round Rock with no major angle, you're going to feel the pain a little bit.
I was gonna piggyback on that. The highest performers are always snipers. It's a very niche situation of where they place and how they're marketing said short-term rental. Versus, like you were saying, if you're going to have a rental in a neighborhood with no attraction, knowing your audience, maybe that's not a short-term rental property. Maybe that's a business person that's here for 6 months that you're looking for something more long-term. I think knowing your audience and how you're marketing said property is crucial to how the performance is going to be. Not to
right. And continuing on that, Hunter, unless you're willing or have some angle that you're going to do with your outline Airbnb, like turn it into the bridge of the enterprise. So when people come, it's an experience unto itself or something like that. But it's not located close to anything, or it really isn't how can I say, an overflow for a lack of hotel rooms, and you run into trouble and you don't want to put out any cash to turn it into its own little destination for some reason, then now may be the time to move it.
I think it's interesting, too, that where we live here in Austin, Texas, it's ranked number 2 as one of the cities that's being affected by this downturn. And according to a recent video that I watched, it's the revenue for Airbnbs is down 46% right now. So that's got to really hurt if you're somebody who's hanging on to that property. And
well, you got a mortgage coming in. Yeah, of course.
They're comparing this to the subprime crisis of 2008 because of a lot of these so-called DSCR loans that were given for these properties. Make it so you don't really have to prove your income and you don't have to prove, have a good credit score. It's just based on what the revenue is going to be generated by the property. So it's an interesting situation, especially here in Austin. I mean, we are affected very strongly by what's happening right now. Just something to consider.
Yeah, because people think Austin, Texas, right? But they don't realize there's Hutto, there's Leander, and all that is fairly close. There's Taylor, there's Kyle, there's Buda. I mean, the Central Texas market. I mean, we're south of Waco, just north of San Antonio. I mean, the Central Texas market, where Austin is kind of the hub, is ginormous.
Right.
So we really have to understand what those numbers mean. And then the Austin area, they've got to compete with the increase of hotel rooms continuing to increase as well, because they're still building in downtown. And then how did you get into it? If you bought somewhere in Austin, especially near East Austin or downtown area, you didn't get into it cheap.
No, you
so
didn't.
that means you're really counting on these, however many thousands of events happen in the Austin area, and now you gotta charge top dollar if you're looking to operate not even revenue neutral, but operate in the black.
Yeah, see, that's the thing though. If revenue's down 46%, you can't charge top dollar.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, this is what you're running up against. Exactly correct. Yeah. My point exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
then you're running
charge
discounts.
Top dollar all you want.
Those who got in early, which I was saying earlier, those who got in earlier, right? Who got in and they bought in nicely. I mean, it's even for a long-term rental. It's how if you got into it beautifully, then it sets you up to sustain the ups and downs of an evolving market. Short-term rentals are still evolving. They're still evolving. How does it fit? It is exactly Uber, Lyft, and traditional taxis. It's going to have ups and downs during the holding period for these investors. And when you get in early, it just winds you up a little bit to sustain the ups and downs a little bit, because you're not paying top dollar for everything and having to charge top dollar to be able to survive.
Agreed.
Exactly.
I think it's also an interesting thought when you brought up the hotels, you know, an Airbnb or short-term vacation rental versus a hotel. So I'm sure all of us here have stayed in a hotel and we've all stayed in an Airbnb. The experience with an Airbnb can be great. And especially seeing it from the back end, you know, getting to see these support phone calls and having to help, you know, you have stranded vacationers, you know, where their property owner potentially could go MIA or the code doesn't work or a litany of issues. Hotels are consistent. And, you know, that's definitely a factor, I think, in some of these newer or these startup short-term vacation rental property owners. Consistency, and how are you going to compete in that market with a hotel? You know, the hotel is going to be the same. You're going to arrive at a time, you're going to go into your room, and you're going to continue on.
It's going to be fully staffed.
Whatever amenities are there you have, and you're going to be able to move on. It's almost like a roll of the dice sometimes with an Airbnb, you know? And I think the guys at the top, the whales and the sharks at the top of the game, they're running the game because they're running it like a hotel, and it's like that. It's at that level. But, you know, when you have someone that, oh, Sally Sue is making all this money with the vacation rentals, I want to get into that market, and you don't put the time and thought into it, like you were saying, versus somebody maybe who does, you might run into trouble. You might not have that place booked as much as you thought.
Let me come in here and kind of pick up where you're at, Hunter. And in the Daily Cost, there's an article by Marissa Higgins. Now, this is the Newsweek article was more data driven. This one is more experiential, maybe, and it's more anecdotal. So it says, she said, the short-term rental industry has driven up cost of housing in many, many communities. Now, this would refer back to the fact that it's corporations and private investors have taken homes off the market. So the demand has been really high. The supply has been really low. And part of that is the fault, or I don't want to say fault, but because investors were buying up single family residences for investment for the short-term rental game, or short-term rental business. Let me be fair there. The general idea is that real estate investment firms and corporations convert spaces that would perfectly fine to rent long-term into short-term rentals in order to make a profit. So there again, even that I think fits into what Jason was saying with these communities that are being built now that are only, you know, they're rental based. They're not going to sell the houses. So at least that is still a long-term solution, or can be, for people moving into the area or people needing to get out of an apartment, whatever, because their family's growing, whatever it may be. So when there is less housing available, landlords can then increase their prices of what's left. That we've seen that definitely happen over the past 3 years. So then you have people scrambling to make a rent, get approved for a place to begin with in a community where you have fewer long-term neighbors. And that's a quick way to force people out of communities. Basically, it's highway to displacement. So almost like a gentrification of it becoming so expensive that the people who've been there long-term can no longer afford to live there, which we've seen that across Austin. Right.
Affordable housing, right? This is affordable. This is we know slips into the whole affordable housing issue. And I mean, every major municipality is fighting that as well. And, you know, the short-term rentals, I think, play a smaller part in that, but they do. Every part that's being played makes a difference for sure.
Yeah. And I just wanted to point out that the data that we're looking at, there's anecdotal evidence. Maybe there's this sentiment towards short-term rentals. The investors love them. I think the travelers love them. But I'm beginning to wonder if the communities are actually in love with them as much as the investors are, you know, and that goes back to what you're saying, Jason, with more of these restrictions that are coming up in HOAs and of not allowing short-term rentals to be present in their communities. You know,
but it doesn't make a difference because we don't allow short-term rentals. Okay, but an investor comes in and buys a property and turns it into a long-term rental. It's still a rental property. Right?
Yeah, but it still meets the need of a family, like a long-term permanent resident. And that's kind of where I'm looking at this as the angle of we've seen the shortage over the past 3 years of people who need housing, and it was either unaffordable, the prices skyrocketed. Now we're seeing a correction. I don't see we're going to see a housing crash in Central Austin, but we're seeing a correction when price decreases and inventory sitting on the market longer. All that points to bigger things, I think. That's for another podcast, probably. I mean, I told you guys that before we started, I'm going to be like Jeremiah on this topic. I am the weeping prophet having to deliver bad news, and you guys try to convince me or convince the investor or whoever, because there are people, I think, that are truly feeling this right now, and they don't know what to do. And, my mindset is, if you're feeling it like that, to that degree, and there's this possible sentiment of a short-term rental bust coming, because travel's decreasing, the economy shrinking. It just depends on who you're listening to. In your awareness, maybe you need to, before the market gets flooded with single-family residences that no investor wants to pick up because now the short-term rental market's down, and then also there's not a whole lot of people there. There's still a lot of people, don't get me wrong, but the inventory could potentially be flooded, and now you can't get out of a situation because there's too many options for people now. Like, they have more options they ever had, and your home's going to sit on the market for 6 months. I have a house that's 4 houses down from me that's been on the market now for 5 months. That's been unprecedented over the past 3 years, and so now we can see that transition happening. And so that's just why I'm bringing it up, and being, like I said, being Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, pointing some of these negativities out, because I want to hear what you guys are seeing. What the advice is to investors, what the counsel is, those types of things.
One thing also too to keep in mind is that builders are actually building more houses because they were very bullish in the first part of the year, thinking that there's not going to be that bad of a recession or no recession at all. So they're, for all intents and purposes, they are flooding the market too as well. And so they're going to also be something to compete with if you decide to list your home down the road too. That's something to think about. I actually stopped to buy a new construction community in South Austin, and they're offering all kinds of perks. 5.49% financing for the life of the loan, and they're also covering all of the closing costs. That's how desperate they're getting, and it's only just beginning. So that's another source of homes that you're going to have to compete with should you decide to list it. That's another thing to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. I think the one thing is, we just want to communicate urgency for your particular situation. You need to talk to a real estate agent and a financial advisor to go over your numbers and your specific situation to see if you need to get out of this or not, or if you have the ability to, like Hunter said, persevere through this time. I mean, and hopefully come out on the other side with a positive outcome.
Basically, comes down to the clash. Should I stay or should I go? I mean, that's a big question, Todd. That's a big question.
Yeah. And also, there may be people that are actually considering joining, like doing this now. They haven't heard this news, right? I just got an email this morning, as a matter of fact, and it was somebody who was trying to sell DSCR loans. And they were like, hey, look, it's really easy to get loans for short-term rentals. Call me, blah, 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 or whatever. So they're still trying to get people hooked into this notion that you're going to get rich by, getting these easy loans and being able to turn a profit. So if you're considering that now, do your due diligence, do your research, and make sure you're not jumping in, because you're too late, in my opinion.
Well, in this market,
you missed the boat, and you're going to hit the ocean, baby.
Yeah.
Like
it's never
said,
too late, right? It's just a matter of what you're going to run up against. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's super important. And I don't think that even now in 2023 that it is impossible to run a profitable vacation rental if you were going to start now, not someone who's been in the game. But you, having seen the numbers on the back end, you have to be a sniper in what you're doing. even if it's just one rental property, because the more that you are focusing your audience and there's a reason for this place to be booked and there's a reason for you to go here, and it's not just because, oh, I have a house that can shelter somebody for X amount of time, that no one's going to want to go there unless, like Jason was saying, you have turned that property into a destination itself. It doesn't need any surrounding destination. But if you just have a spot, the beach, Padre, like he was mentioning before, those people are always going to go there. So the places like that, I feel like will consistently stay booked. But, taking homes off the market from, like single family residents, taking those off the market to kind of corner people into renting with these vacation rental companies or these investors, I think it's what put us all in this box. I don't think that is the route to success. And if you would like to circumnavigate that and still get into this game now, you just have to be very, very vigilant and do your due diligence on where you're going to put your property.
Yeah. Good advice, Hunter. And to Rod's point, I was looking at some other data on the amount of permits of new construction in 2022. There were more, like Central Texas, there were more permits applied for in 2022 than any time previously. And now all of those permits are getting approved, and builders they're building. They're just like, let's throw these things up, and hopefully, we can get these sold. And now they're, I saw a builder that was offering, I think they had almost $39,000 in incentives. Use it however you want. Buy down the rate, So those are some of the things that someone who wants to sell their homes may have to compete with, but it's going to be tougher if the market does get flooded and a lot of investors are trying to offload the short-term rental to, because it's hurting them too much. It's going to happen, I believe, but all these little micro factors are going to be what determines whether that's what you as an investor and holder of a short-term rental needs to do. That's like, it's so personal.
It's extremely personal. I think it's probably the most, you want to appeal to that guest. You know what your mission is, what you're trying to accomplish. Going at it with a like a blanket mission statement per se, and just anybody can come or anybody can book here, I don't think is the way to be successful right now with how many giants there are in the market. I think being niche, I think being unique, I think being somewhere very personalized is what's going to make you be successful right now, at least at this stage in the game.
Right. And hey, I was out of Verbo a couple of weeks ago, and it was such a niche house. They had done some real improvements on the house. First of all, they had a nice pool. They had a jacuzzi. They had a pickleball court. They had a basketball court. They had a courtyard in the middle of the home. And, 12 people could probably stay at this house. And so those are the types of things that you may be up against and not realize it in the market. And that's the home that's going to stay booked versus just your home just sitting out here and hoping you're going to, keep bookings. You may have bookings during peak times because of the demand. But that's the research you have to do and the question you have to ask yourself.
Got to look at the competition. Why am I going to book with A when I could book with B, and B has all of these incentives? And then there's even C, which is a hotel. You have a ton of competition. So you really have to make sure you stand out.
And with hotels too, they're much more centrally located usually. They're right downtown on 2nd Street, for instance, versus being on 2nd Street East on the other side of I-35, which is not walking distance to all of the stuff that you want to actually do, then the reason why you came to Austin.
And
So
if you clog the toilet, you just call the maintenance guy, and he comes plunges it for you.
Right.
In the short-term rental, you're just like, well, where's the plunger at?
And nobody's going to bring you food at 2 a.m. either if you want some fried chicken and eggs or whatever,
So, all right. So we are looking at this. So thank you for listening so far. If you've heard the conversation we're having about this. And as real estate agents, we feel like it's important for us to have this type of conversation that is based in some reality so that you're making very good, solid decisions for yourself and how your investment going forward. Do you need the cash out of the house? Take advantage of the market while it's still mostly up? Or are you comfortable with this long-term approach to income? Those are two questions. Can you tolerate that? So guys, based on just what we're talking about, the short-term rental market, and in some of the factors that I feel like are going to play in, and we're going to wrap this up with a few other statements. Give me sort of your prediction based on what you've seen in the data so far for Central Texas. We're talking about Central Texas. We're talking about short-term rentals, not all the other factors or opportunities or housing, just short-term rentals. Rod.
I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind right now is that I don't think this is going to change overnight. I think this is going to get worse. And the reason why is because the Fed just raised the interest rate 2 weeks ago. They're going to raise it again, and they're probably going to raise it even possibly a third time. That's going to be 13 or 14 consecutive interest rates in a row. And we're at 4% inflation right now. We need to be at 2. And so we're still not there yet. And that's going to take a while to get there. And then even once we are there, does that mean, then interest rates are going to start falling again? I don't think so. I think we're in for a long haul here. And that's something to think about.
I mean, I agree with Rod. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, who knows? Who knows? The reality is, look at where you are right now, how much you have to put in, what your, be specific, holding period. What's your holding period? You want to hold it for another 2 years? Then you have to make some moves now. And that means you have to spend money to make it a destination, or, you have to figure it out. Or you want to unload it in the current market, talk to a real estate professional like us. We can kind of give you an idea of value, and then you can kind of make those decisions. But considering what the experts are saying and what people are looking at, the market, all the volatility, all the dynamic aspects of the market, make a decision and then, put together your group and make it happen.
If I had to make a prediction, I agree with what Rod and Jason said, but I do think that we will see an influx in listings of vacation rentals that are going to now be sold and that are going to be put onto the market. I do think that will happen. And ultimately, I think it'll be a good thing. I think that it'll help more families get into homes. I think it'll help them have more options. And then the people that stayed in the game will have less competition. And I think that they will potentially become more profitable. Like I said, it's really, you have to really be specific. But I do think that it is still a market where money can be made. It just you have to be educated. You have to make smart moves. You have to know your audience and know what you're looking to try to accomplish. But that's my prediction.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that and what I've seen. So some of the things I follow just personally, all right? Again, this is not financial advice. What I follow to look at the economy. I look at like travel. I look at the car market. Believe it or not, the car market is a really strong indicator of where the economy is. And unfortunately, right now, there are more cars being repossessed than in the past 3 years. Unfortunately, right now, there are dealers who have, we had a car shortage basically because of the supply chain issues for 3 years. But now the dealers are getting influxed with new cars. They can't sell them, and they're sending new cars to auction. So, so people are feeling the financial pinch of the economy, and they're losing their cars. I just heard about one of the first foreclosures in my community that's happened in like 3 years. So, that's like, man, what's happening? It should make us really reflect and think and be even more precise in our decision making and not go into this or stay in it on an emotional level. That's the thing we have to be cautious of. And then here's the other thing. There's 2 things that's happening in September that I think is really going to impact travel. The first one, student loan repayment begins. I was just watching data on this, and the student loan repayment, people were getting notified that their student loans, they're going to have to start making payments again. And the call centers for the student loan, the people who hold the student loans got overwhelmed because people thought, based on the news media, that their loans were forgiven. They didn't realize that there was stuff still being held up in court. They thought the administration had forgiven their loans, they're good. So I think what we're going to see is less expendable income because these student loans are going to, the Pipers, it's, he wants his due. And then the second thing is going to be also, and this doesn't necessarily affect Texas, because I think our governor did not go through this, but a lot of places there was a rental eviction moratorium for people who couldn't pay their rent. And now that's ending. And now they're going to have to start paying rent, and now the landlords can also proceed with eviction. So, we have all of these things that I feel like have cushioned the blow of what we're seeing in our economy. And people bought cars and they did other things, and now they're not going to be able to afford the cars. We're already seeing that. There's all these little micro, maybe it's macro, I can't remember, things that people have to consider when they're looking at the economy in general. And is travel going to be impacted when people's expendable income is greatly reduced because of some of these other things? Who knows, right? We can't predict it entirely, but they are factors that should be considered as, that's the things I would look at as an agent, like who's talking to an investor or a private, someone who has maybe one or two short-term rentals, and they're asking, and they say, hey, I haven't had a booking in 2 months. I'm getting scared. What should I do? Well, here's some factors you should consider. And what does that predict about the next 6 months? Right. So, or 8 months, or like Rod is saying, possibly even longer. I mean, that's the Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, bringing some of the negativity to this conversation, and people got to do the research and do it. Take the steps that they need to take, as we've mentioned. So, as we are wrapping up, I don't know if we can necessarily end this on a high note, other than if you're stuck, get into it early and list your home. Get out of it if you need to. Talk to someone. Reach out to us, Hill International Realty. We are agents. We are professionals. We are market experts for this community, for Central Texas. We can, help you out. So reach out to us so that we can assist you, hopefully, with making a very strong, positive decision for what's right for you in this particular scenario, in your particular situation. Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining us. You can also find us on all the major platforms to listen to us. And also, remember, you can find us at higroup.atx.com. You can see about the brokerage. You can see who we are. You can read our bios. You can get introduced to agents. You can contact us through the website. So we encourage you to go to the website, check it out. And I'm sure there will be a link to the website in the description on the YouTube channel. So click that. Go check us out. We'd love to talk to you about your needs in the real estate market.